Hello and welcome back to the Single Malt Review. I'm Tim, good evening once again, or morning if that may be the case, although they do say never watch whiskey YouTube videos before noon. Couldn't say why. At any rate, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. Today I'm going on something of a whiskey investigation. And what am I delving into? Well, Aberlours specifically, but more importantly the question of chill filtration, or indeed the lack thereof. As you're probably aware, it is ever the refrain of the whiskey critic that whiskey is better off without chill filtration. The question why is actually a bit more interesting, and that's what we're going to be having a look at today. Why is it better? Is it better because it's a truer representation of the whiskey's sort of pedigree, its distillery character, its provenance? Is it better because you usually get a bit more in the bottle? Is it better because there's simply more parts to make up the whole that is the dram you end up with in the glass? Is it better at all? These are the questions. And there's a lot of whiskey opinion floating around with it because, at least for average consumers like myself, the whiskey we have access to is very difficult to find a direct comparison. You get one expression here, one expression there, chill filtered, unchill filtered, but they're usually not the same age, they're usually not the same style, it goes on and on. What I've been able to find is something that in the scientific world you would call a control from the good people at Aberlours. They have produced two 12-year-olds, one unchill filtered and one chill filtered, which is going to be tremendously useful because it means I can compare them a little bit more empirically than I would to different bottles which had different ages or different styles. These are more or less classic Aberlours, both 12 years old, both aged in the classic style of Aberlours, which is maybe not sherry dominant, but certainly sherry influenced. It's really one of the classic Speysides if you're into your Speyside whiskey, although for some reason they've put Highland single malt Scotch whiskey on their bottle. Goodness knows why. I guess Highland's fashionable at the moment. But Aberlours, and I can guarantee it is a Speyside malt, look it up, has been the way it has been for a very, very long time. It's been around forever. The whiskey itself has changed very, very little over the years. The bottle has, they've gone to these sort of big old heavy ones at the moment, but what's inside, fairly static, and that works well for me because it means I'm pretty familiar with what it, I say, should taste like, what I expect it to taste like. Really, this is what it should taste like because this is the same version, more or less, only unchill filtered. And that is something I'm far less familiar with. So, I stand to be, I hope, surprised. And myself, as a whiskey critic, and a great many others, also hope that this one is the favourite, don't we? Otherwise we're going to be looking a bit silly. Anyway, let's see what we can see. Before I even open the bottle, there's differences already, and important reasons for those differences. The primary one is that this, rather than at 40%, is at 48%. And this is, aside from being 8% more whiskey in the bottle, which is just fine by me any day of the week, is because if this was 40%, and trust me, they would bottle this at 40% if they could, if this was at 40, this would be cloudy, and that's something that they really don't want. You still cannot get away with cloudy whiskey on the shelf. People just are not, they are not ready. They are not ready for whatever reason, or at least so the marketing departments of these whiskey companies are. In this case, it's Pernod Ricard, Global Spirits, Leviathan, that owns Aberlours. So, 48%, because if this was lower than 48%, it would start to go cloudy, or it would be at risk of going cloudy if the bottle got a little cool. And this would be sort of calculated fairly scientifically. They would have run some tests on this and see what they could get away with, which is why you will see unchill filtered whiskies vary in their percentage. It will always be over or around 46%. 46 is where a lot of them can sort of float. You'll see that as quite a common value on unchill filtered whiskies, but some, they need a little bit more, and so they get it. You'll see them all the way up to 50% sometimes, just because that's where they stabilize and become safe to put on the shelf. So, you can tell that difference without even opening the bottle. For everything else, we're going to have to look in a little bit deeper. Sadly, though this one may be unchill filtered, they are both coloured, so they're identical to look at, and sadly we won't be able to discern anything from that, but never mind. There are other means. Rightio. We shall start, I think, with the ordinary one. What I'll be looking for is the very, very classic Aberlours of, oh yes, there it is, lovely Speyside fruits, bit of rich honey, wax, oak, a little bit of fruit candy, all very promising, really. And before I ruin my palate, I'll compare that to the unchilled filtered. And it's already different. A tiny, tiny bit of prickle on the nose, because that's almost 10% stronger there, so it's getting up, probably wants a bit of water, but we'll get to that. This one is quite markedly different. Funnily enough, the impression I get is that it's a slightly younger whiskey. Of course, these are both 12 years old, but the nose on this one is distinctly fresher. There's a crispness to the nose on this one, a liveliness that, pleasing though the ordinary one is just not there. There's also a creaminess and a smooth quality, despite the higher strength, that one simply does not possess. This one has notes of cream along with the fruit, which takes on a slightly more stewed character. And this one, there's a cooked fruit aroma coming out of here, and a spiciness as well. There's cinnamon and clove, which were absent from the 12. What I hope they haven't done, what I really hope they haven't torpedoed me with, is used markedly different blends of whiskey in these two expressions. I haven't pre-tasted these in any scientific capacity, so they may have, and this may be all for naught. However, I don't think it'll be that much different, because there's a classic Aberlours style and they tend to stick with it. If they were uncoloured, I'd be able to make that comparison a lot easier. If this one was, say, a little bit more bourbon dominant than the other one, it would be a bit more obvious. However, we'll just have to stick to our guns. So yes, stewed fruit, creaminess and spiciness, as opposed to crisper, fresher fruit, significantly more wood, a lot more oakiness on this one, and a distinctly waxy quality. So in terms of the nose, they're really quite different. We'll just have to see what the palate tells us. I do like a bit of Aberlours. That follows through rather well from the nose to the palate. It's very, very gentle, as it should be, at 40%. Doesn't need any water, and it's lovely, juicy ripe fruits, red fruits. Very, very, very good, indicative Speyside characters with that just little bit of sherry in there to sweeten everything up. It's classic Aberlours. Which it should be, given how long it's been the same. You'd think they've probably gotten the formula right by this stage. But nothing, ultimately, too surprising. Let's compare it with the unchill filtered. Ooh, big difference. First of all, most notably, is the strength. It is significantly stronger. The difference between 40 and 48% may not look huge on paper, but when you consider that the whiskey was only maybe 60, 63 when it went into the barrel, that's a significant percentage increase. It's not just 8% more. It's quite a lot when it comes down to the whiskey if you remove the water from the equation. So quite a good, lively hit on the tongue there. A little prickly as well. as lively as it is, that smooth creaminess is still very much in play. But what it does need, and what it can take, is a little bit of water, which I would not recommend for the other one. So we'll bring that a bit further down towards 40%. And if it's going to play along, we should fairly quickly see one of the things they're afraid of, the reason why it's bottled at 48. It's not such a bad example really, but if you look, you can see there's an opacity to that one that's come into play, and that is why it's 48%, not 40. Right, now we're looking a bit more in common with the rather the chill filtered version. There it is. What a difference 8% can make. With that addition of water, these fruits that were in the other one, they've come back out, far more in play. It's less of a stewed quality. The creaminess has subsided a little, though it's still there. And the liveliness, the freshness, the sort of youthful aspect is still there. They're still very different animals, but they are a little more in keeping, now that they're more or less the same strength, 40%. The primary difference I think I would spot is that there is a much greater weight of body on this one. It just seems to be a little more dense on the palate. It coats the mouth for that little bit longer than this one does. It just sticks around a wee bit longer. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I suppose depends on how you're drinking your whiskey and what you want from it. For me, this is sort of the ideal really, because I like to think I'm a fairly thoughtful whiskey drinker, and that I want it to stick around because I like to sit and sort of cogitate between sips. But on the other hand, if you were trying to maybe move your whiskey along a little bit faster, trying to get things going, maybe, you might want something just a little bit more easy going, because sips of this one, they're a bit more upfront. Its face value is a bit easier to read. There's less layers, but there's more in the first frame, so to speak. It's a bit more easier to pass, I suppose, on the tongue. Whether that's for you or not, I suppose, as I say, depends on why you're drinking it and how you enjoy your whiskey. With these two particularly, it's a little difficult to tell because, similar as they are, I think the blend involved in the unchill filtered version is a little different. That I was expecting a little bit more liveliness on this one, but not as much as I got. I think there is a different mix of whiskies in this one as opposed to this one. I'm not confident to say whether one has more sherry in it than the other. Was I to make a guess, I would say that the unchill filtered 12-year-old has a bit more top dressing involved, which, if you're not familiar with the term top dressing, is when you have a malt that's older than what's on the label, tipped in there to maybe round off the edges or give it a dimension or quality that it wouldn't possess if the whiskey was purely 12 years old and nothing older. But which one's better is the question, isn't it? And the more I taste these, the more I think that these are actually quite different animals in the blending. I think superficially similar, though they may appear, both Aberlours, both 12 years old, I think they're actually quite different animals in the bottle. I think the blending is quite different that goes into these two, which makes my job a bit more difficult. This comparison is not going to be nearly as empirical as I had hoped coming in. However, I like to think I'm fairly internally consistent with scores, so I'll just have to do my best. And starting with the classic 12 years old. Pedestrian as it may be, walking along at 40% and chill filtered, it's a classic for a reason. It's a tremendous, tremendous whisky, and if you're a fan of the Speyside style, it's a effortless recommendation. The Aberlours 12-year-old chill filtered, I would give an 86. It's a very, very strong whisky, considering how normal you might want to call it. And on the other hand, its gruff, unshaven, unchill filtered brother, nonetheless 12 years old, nonetheless Aberlours. What would I give this one? Damn. I'm going to have to be a little bit controversial here. That's only a 79. Oh dear. It's all gone wrong. Now, I should preface this. I still think unchill filtered whisky is better, but as I mentioned before, I think there's significantly different whisky in the bottle here. I don't think this is so much an unchill filtered version of this. I think it's quite a different blend that Aberlours have put together, and it's appeared as a unchill filtered version, and I'm not sure exactly what the difference is. Maybe there's more bourbon in here, maybe there's... who knows, really. This is quite a different beast, and it's not as good. I would be lying if I said it was good. As much of a fan as I may be of no chill filtration, which I remain, this is just a better whisky over here. That's deeply, deeply unfortunate. It's sort of blown my experiment a bit out of the water, but these things happen. These things happen. So in this one case, I would have to recommend the chill filtered version. It is actually empirically better, at least by my arguably fair rating system, of which I enjoy the most. This one, even with the water, coaxing it along, it's just a bit rough. It tastes like a whisky that's younger than 12 years old, not one that's really ready. Well, there you have it. Slightly controversial result, maybe. I'm certainly surprised. Not what I expected coming to this at all. I've scandalised myself with this one. But ultimately, you cannot argue with the tongue, and mine enjoys this one quite a little bit more than the other. I'm still very much of the opinion that unchill filtered whisky is better, but just not in this case, which is a bit of a bother, because it means I'm going to have to continue the search for two analogous whiskies and make this comparison once again. When that is going to be, I really don't know. I'll have to keep looking. If anyone does know of two comparable whiskies that have a chill-filtered and an unchill-filtered version of one another, then do let me know, so I've got something to go on at least, rather than just sort of wandering the streets looking for these, which could take me some time. Though I will get there in the end, I promise. And if you have your own opinion, please post up in the comments below. I usually get back to everybody eventually. I guess that's one of the benefits of being such a small channel. Keeps it nice and niche and personal. In the meantime, this has been the Single Malt Review. Compelling stuff, I think. I will have to go back to the drawing board with this one and come back with a better argument for unchill filtration, because there's still one to be made. However, that's all I have for today. In the meantime, do keep safe. And Slanger, till next time.